So even though I set the time for 3:33 p.m., I usually start at 3:30, which kind of gives people some time to get in here. It gives me an opportunity to kind of talk through some of the introduction material and just start. And then by 3:33, we'll actually start and get into the information and get into the journal. So as you all are coming in again, many of you are anticipating these every Sunday, and I'm always wondering how many people are as excited and looking forward to this as I am, because I'm super excited. I kind of plan my entire Sunday morning around being here on Sundays. Thank you. I want to say Deanna. Thank you. Happy Sunday, everyone. Paulette, welcome. Desi Bates, welcome. Meme Estrada. I hope I'm saying these right, but everybody, welcome. What I was saying was, okay, cool, Deanna. Snowball, you have the journal. That's awesome. So a couple of things that I'm actually doing different this Sunday than I've done on the last 2 Sundays. So what I was doing was I was attaching the product to the live. Snowball, I'm glad it came yesterday. That's right on time. Mimi, got it. So I was attaching the product to the live and giving people an opportunity to just click on the link on the live so they can actually go and get the journal. But I realized by doing that, TikTok kind of restricted what I could talk about. And it really made it about trying to promote the journal, which is not essentially what these lives are for, right? I dedicated time to do these for people that have already gotten the journal and people that actually want to go through and dig into these step-by-step guides that the journal has provided, and people that are looking for additional guidance on how to do shadow work using the journal. So this Sunday, I'm not attaching the journal to the live, even though that's what we're here to talk about. But I really want to be able to speak freely to you all and really dig into the information without having to worry about TikTok violations and TikTok 333. So it's go time. Miss Plenty More, you right on time. It's go time, right? But yeah, so again, I really just want to set this time aside so that we can talk about the journal. So I don't have to feel restricted by what I can say and have to keep mentioning the journal and where you can go get it and all those things. I think it's important to let people that are just tapping in know. Sunflower, welcome. 3:33 is go time. You guys know. And if you know the significance of 3:33, I'm not going to say, because I want you all to kind of go do a little bit of that research. But if you look at 3:33, it actually also equates to 3, 6, and 9, which are all powerful numbers that relate to positive progress and positive spirituality. But again, so this Sunday, I'm not attaching the product to the video. So we're going to actually be able to speak freely. I'm going to talk about the YouTube page that these videos are actually getting posted to. So if you just received your journal and you've missed the last 2 Sundays, you can go to my YouTube page, www.youtube.com//@girl_dad. It's also in the link in my bio here, and you'll be able to find all of these videos that we're doing every Sunday. Lindsay, welcome. Hernandez, welcome. Lori Murphy, welcome. Stroborn 5, welcome. Look, I get so excited about these on Sunday. I'm always sitting around wondering who else is really getting excited and waiting for 3:33. So what I was saying was I also start right around about 3:30. But I allow that 3 minutes so everybody can kind of get in here so we can get into the information. So I'm glad each and every one of you are here. Before I start, I just want to say I am super proud and just amazed by how many people have joined us on this journey. How many people have dedicated themselves to their own spiritual growth, to their own spiritual healing, to their own shadow work. As I read your comments, as I read your progress in the comments, and as I read the messages that many of you all are sending me, I am not only inspired and motivated, but I'm encouraged every single day, right? So thank you all for joining me on this journey. As I stated from the very beginning of doing this, shadow work can be complicated at times, but if we embark upon this journey as a community, we're absolutely going to get through it, and we're going to be that support system for one another. So, Nay Marie, I'm so glad you got your book right on time. Do they have it in BN? I'm not sure what BN is, but if you specify, I'll definitely answer. Miss Ty Lewis, welcome to the live. Kathy, welcome. So this is what we're going to do. We have a little more freedom this Sunday to actually dig into the materials. I have my notes and everything prepared. As I was saying, I don't have the journal attached to this live, so I'm not restricted by some of the things that TikTok expects me to do. So we can speak really freely. So if anyone just received their journal and you weren't able to follow along for the last 2 Sundays when we actually started, you can go to my YouTube page, is at girl_dad. And that should take you straight to the page. The link is in my bio here on my TikTok page. That's where you'll be able to find these videos. I'll give a brief explanation, Brown Sugar, as to what the journal is and what we're doing. And we'll go back and touch on what we touched on the last 2 Sundays. And then we're going to get into the information that we're going to be covering this Sunday. But again, if you missed the last 2 Sundays and you did not receive your journal until now, awesome, Lori. I'm glad you found it. And then subscribe to the page. So that way, every time I load one of these videos and some of the other content that I'll be adding to the page, you'll be able to tap in and actually have access to that information. All right, so I want to jump right into this because I want to get us started. I know many of you have been setting time aside for your Sunday to do this. So I'm not going to babble along too much. I just want to get into the information so we can actually get to this work, right? Because that's the whole point of this. And again, what I realized was I'm setting this time aside for Cartel the Great Brother. I need your help. Remember my name. I got you. Message me, Cartel, and we can talk about it. I'm setting this time aside for those of you that have already ordered the journal and that have the journal. And what I want to do is give you all some additional guidance through the journal. And then most importantly, I want to work with you all on the reflection questions. Because as you're completing the activities in the journal, it's really the reflection questions that are giving you the tools that are applicable to your everyday life. And what I found as I worked through the journal was, if you haven't done shadow work or any spiritual healing, sometimes you can be stuck on the reflection questions. And those are the most important part because they're actually going to give you the tools that are necessary for you to actually rewrite some of those behavior patterns in your life and start seeing the actual result of your shadow work. So that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm also going to ask you all to do me a favor. If someone is asking in the comments, what is shadow work? And if you're familiar with the definition that's in the journal, if you're familiar with what shadow work is, share that with them, because there are going to be moments where I'm not tapped into the comments, but I'm just going to be covering the information, and I may miss some of those comments for the people that are just asking. Also, I'll take breaks in between going over the information in the journal to just engage you all and get your responses in the comment, because I want this to really be like we're having a conversation, right? Where I'm covering and giving some of the in-depth information or some of the insight into the shadow work. But I also want you all's feedback, because one of the things that I've learned is by getting feedback from you all in these lives, I'm also growing and I'm also learning and I'm also expanding myself. So we're going to take those moments to go back and forth and really talk about it. But first, I just want to cover briefly what shadow work is, why we're doing it. We're going to cover the last 2 Sundays and what we went over, and then we're going to jump into where we are in the journal now. So if you just got your journal and you missed the last 2 Sundays, I'm going to briefly kind of cover where we are or where we began, and then we'll talk briefly about what shadow work is, and then we're going to it. Becky, you got yours. That's what's up. I'm glad it arrived. When did you get it, Becky? So this is the shadow work journal, right? We've chosen to use the shadow work journal as a tool for many of us that have joined on this healing journey to do shadow work. 1, because it's very simple to understand. 2, it's very in depth. And 3, it does give you a step-by-step guide. Pamela, I'm glad it's coming tomorrow. You'll be able to catch this video and any other video on YouTube if you miss it. So you'll be able to tap in this morning. That's what's up. You're very welcome, Becky. I appreciate all that you do to support to be a support to me while I do these lives, to moderate and kind of keep me on point with a lot of the information. You're a blessing and you're a gift. So to send you a copy of that was just an easy go-to, and just a way to say thank you for everything that you do. But we chose the Shadow Work Journal because it's easy to understand. It does go into depth as to what shadow work is, what the root and why you're doing your shadow work. But then it gives you these activities that serve as a step-by-step guide through doing your shadow work. Some of the things that I thought was challenging in the journal was the reflection questions. And in a way of being a facilitator and being a further assistance to those of you that have joined me on this journey, we're doing these Sunday lives so that we can kind of address some of those reflection questions and some of the things that may be challenging in the journal to give you some additional guidance. So the part of the journal where we're at is in this part, the shadow work activities, which is part 2. And essentially what this part is covering is wound mapping. So we covered a lot of this information, and I would flip the page so that you guys can read it. But hopefully most of you that are here you actually have the journal, because that's really why I'm doing these lives, or for people that have already ordered the journal and to make other people aware of where to get the journal, right? So we talked about wound mapping, and what we've covered so far is really talking about the 4 highlighted wounds in the journal and really being able to identify which one of these attributes you can relate to. Well, we were also covered. So after discussing the wound mapping and the importance of understanding what your wound is, what we also went into were the fill in the blank activities. So the Sunday that we started, we did part 1. You can find this video on YouTube. I believe it's the one that's labeled July the 23rd is when we went into the fill in the blank activity part 1. And then on July the 30th, we went into fill in the blank activity part 2. So part 1 was really about identifying that childhood wound. Part 2 was about really going back to those memories and addressing some of those memories and understanding how to reframe and really revisit them so that you can embrace and then heal properly from the way that you perceived it at the time that you experienced it to the information and understanding that you have now. Now, to answer the general question as to what is shadow work and it's relative to this part of it, shadow work is the idea of revisiting traumatic events in your life and dealing with the emotions that you may have repressed at the time. And it's important to do that because many people think like, hey, I'm okay today. What is the necessity of having to go back to revisit things that have happened to me? Well, the reality is this. In the moments that those things happen to you, if you didn't address them properly, if you didn't have the proper therapy or the proper work things or the people around you to help you work through those emotions, you probably repressed a lot of how you felt at the moment just to be able to move on. And what ultimately happens is you develop behavioral patterns out of those repressed emotions, and those behavior patterns don't actually serve your well-being. There's an in-depth definition into what shadow work is in the journal. I've also listed several videos on my page where I give some really good analogies to use to kind of give you guys an in-depth understanding of what shadow work is. So if you're just new to the page and you haven't gotten your copy of the journal and you really want to understand, Cap Studio, how are you? What shadow work is, I would recommend that you go check out those videos because those analogies really help to simplify what shadow work is. Having covered those 2 things, where we are today is we're at part 3 of the fill in the blank activity in the wound mapping section. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So before we start, Ms. T. Ellis, how are you? Welcome back. One of the things that I always want to recommend to you all, first of all, this is your shadow work, right? There's no speed to it. There's no time limit to it. There's no time expectation as to what you ought to complete or when you should be completing it. Shadow work is about you. It's about you revisiting those events in your life that you may have put away, that you may have repressed some of those emotions, that you may have hidden the way that you felt about them just to survive. One of the other things that I'm going to be addressing here really soon, and I'm really trying to figure out a way to word the video properly so that it resonates with the people that I would like it to resonate with, is the idea of kind of how people are reconciling shadow work to any religious or spiritual belief system. And I know the term shadow kind of, it initiates in people's minds some sense of darkness, but shadow work is not contrary to any foundational belief systems that I know. In fact, most foundational belief systems will take you through some form of this very process, but just under the guise of whatever religious umbrella it is, right? But I'm actually working on a video, and the only reason I'm doing the video because I believe that even the people that may have a religious foundation that hear the word shadow and associate it with something negative or something dark, I believe they too can benefit if they have an understanding of what shadow work is. So the reason I'm going to do that video is not to try to prove anyone wrong or to try to negate what they may think. The purpose of the video is going to be to give them an understanding, even from their religious or from their belief system perspective, so that they can also see the benefit of healing, because that's all shadow work is, right? Going through a process of healing. Now, with that said, one of the things that I always encourage before and after you do your shadow work is grounding. That information is also in the journal for those of you that have your journal, and it really speaks in depth into why that grounding is important. One of the grounding activities that I like to do that I'm going to share with you all that we're going to do each and every Sunday as we start these is a breathing activity. I learned this breathing activity while practicing Tai Chi. Not only did it help me in that process, but it's also a breathing activity that helps if you have any struggles with sleeping. It's one that we're going to do every Sunday. So if you're joining along with these and you're following along on Sundays, you probably already know how to do this activity. But I like to go into a little bit of in-depth understanding of it for those of you that are just tapping in for the first time. Essentially, normally when you breathe or when you take in a deep breath, what you find is that your chest expands. And the reason why your chest is expanding is because that's the depth to which you're pulling in the air. In this breathing activity, so I'm going to just raise up slightly because I was told that the breathing activity has been a distraction for some people. But essentially what you want to do is, Becky was the one that pointed that out for me. But essentially what you want to do is you want to breathe down into the very lower part of your abdomen. And as you're breathing into that area, what should happen first is your stomach should expand before your chest does. And that's how you know that you're sending that air into the right area. And then you also want to be mentally focused on that specific area in your lower abdomen. If any of you are understanding of any chakra work, you'll understand that that is actually an area where one of your chakras resides. So what I recommend is as you inhale, your stomach should expand first, and you should be mentally focused on the air reaching that lower area in your abdomen, right about here. And then when you exhale, you want to slowly push all of that air out, even sucking in your stomach to make sure that all the air is out. While doing this, you want to be focused, imagining and envisioning that air going like the singer with the diaphragm. Pamela, awesome. That's exactly where we are, right? But sometimes the singers will kind of tell you right here, you want to go a little bit lower than that, right? I would say right above where your pubic hair really grows, right above that area is where you want to focus and pulling that air down into. Nava, what's going on, brother? So again, I recommend doing some type of grounding activity before you start your shadow work and after. I choose this breathing activity because it's one that I've always used for grounding. I learned it while doing Tai Chi. I actually practice it in nights where I'm struggling to sleep a little bit. And just that focusing on the air and where it's going allows you to intentionally pull it there. So before we start into part 3 of the fill in the blank activity, which is what we're going to be covering today, I'm going to actually do that breathing activity. One of the things that I always notice when I start the live, I'm so excited to get these going. Right after this breathing activity, my tone changes. I'm a lot calmer, so I know it absolutely helps. Thank you for the gift, Sun Kissed Lot. Hey, one of the things that I always say for these specific lives, And I appreciate it. I don't want this to ever come off as if I don't appreciate it, but I'll never ask you all to gift on these lives, right? The fact that you've already obtained the journal through a link on my page is already enough support for me. And this is simply a way for me to get on here and go over this information and give you all some additional guidance on how to use this amazing tool on this healing journey. But I sure do appreciate it, but just know that's something that I'll never ask you guys to do, especially on these specific lives. So I want to go through this breathing activity as a form of grounding. If you have other activities that you do that you've learned that helps you to ground, and the idea of grounding is just to be physically, mentally conscious within your body. And it kind of pulls you away from those thoughts that may be distracting you. It pulls you away from your daily grind and the things that you may have on your mind. And it brings you present into the moment. That's important in doing your shadow work. You don't want to be distracted by other emotions that you've experienced earlier in the day or experienced earlier in the week, because that can distract you from really focusing on where you need to be to effectively do your shadow work. So again, for this breathing activity that I like to do, you're essentially pulling the air into your lower abdomen at the very bottom of your abdomen, and you want to mentally be conscious of pulling the air into that area. And then when you're pushing that air out, you want to slowly push it out and pull your stomach in so you're getting all of that air out. I like to do about 30 seconds to a minute of this because that's where I find it to be effective in really helping me to center and bringing me into a conscious presence of the moment. So we're going to do that, and then we'll get started in going over the information in the fill in the blank activity part 3 in the wound mapping section of the Shadow Work Journal. All right. So with that said, I like to kind of zone out. So hopefully you're in a comfortable place. If you have the opportunity to do these outside where the sun is, where there's fresh air, where there's some grass, absolutely do so. That connection with the energy of the outdoors, the energy of the sun, the energy of the wind, the energy of the plants around you will absolutely help in your grounding. I actually have an area that I meditate at that gives me all of that. But I like to do these inside because it allows me to kind of give a little more information and not have a lot of the outdoor distractions. But I'm going to start that breathing activity. If you want to follow me along, that's awesome. If you have your own grounding activity that you want to do before we get started, I would encourage you to do so. All right. So I like to kind of check my shoulders. It's the first way of me testing to make sure that I'm relaxed. Once I know that my shoulders are dropped and I can kind of feel that sense of relaxing the rest of my body, then I start the breathing activity. All right, I'm good. That always feels amazing coming out. I don't know if you all have noticed, my entire tone changes when I come out of that breathing activity. Like it's an amazing activity. It's one that I like to do to center and ground myself. I encourage you to do so. But again, the reason why I do that before these lives, before we get into the journal, because I encourage you to do your own centering and grounding before you start your shadow work. It does, right? My voice gets deeper. My voice slows down a little bit. Like my body goes into this state of calm. It's all that excitement and kind of the jitters of starting the live really goes away, and I know like I'm centered and I'm in that grounded place. But it just also lets me know that breathing activity is effective, and that's why it's the one that I choose to share with you all. All right, so again, before we get started in part 3 of the fill in the blank activity, I just want to let everybody know where we are. If you just got your journal, what you'll notice is the very first part of the journal is really a lot of introduction into what shadow work is. So this is the first part of the journal, and it's an introduction into what shadow work is. If you just got your journal, I recommend that you read this and really let that foundational information sit with you, because it's important throughout the process. And the big homie, if you're still waiting on your journal, once your journal arrives, you'll be able to catch this video and the 2 videos from the previous Sundays on my YouTube page. The link is in my bio. And if Becky, if you can put this up periodically, it's www.youtube.com/@girl_dad. You'll be able to catch these videos and kind of follow along once you get your journal on that YouTube page, and it'll be easy just for you to catch up. So don't feel like you're late. Don't feel like if you just ordered your journal that you're going to miss out on anything because I'm going to have these videos up. And the whole point is to make sure that we're going through this process together and you have that additional support and that additional guidance. All right. So this is the first section. This first section really covers a lot of introduction material into what shadow work is. And I encourage you to read that and let that information sit with you. Once you've gone through the introduction section, you're going to get into the shadow work activities, which is where we are. So on the first Sunday, on the 23rd, we really went into talking about the wound mapping and the 4 wounds that the journal really highlights. It's important for you to read this and be very honest with yourself as you're doing your shadow work, right? It's all about you. I don't anticipate anybody going through your journal and trying to read what you wrote. But in order to effectively do shadow work, you do have to be very honest with yourself. And it's going to take some reflection to go through this. I'm going to share with you all how I do the fill in the blank activities. This is not the standard way to do it. There's no standard way for you to do your shadow work. The reason why this journal has been a great tool is because it simply gives you a guide. There's some things that I'm gonna share with you all on how to deviate from just the specifics in the journal that's gonna further help you to execute and do your shadow work effectively, right? So we were able to talk about the wound mapping and really understanding that childhood wound. And what I also shared was you could have experienced any of these wounds as an adult. You could have experienced any of these wounds in a relationship, in any type of situation that you experience them. So it's not really just identifying it from your childhood, even though that's what the journal really focuses on, but you can identify some of these wounds from experiences that you've had as an adult. So we're in the wound mapping section, and right after that, it gets into the fill in the blank activities, which is what we're going to be covering today. So the first 2 fill in the blank activities you're going to find on the YouTube page. The first one we covered on July the 23rd. It will be labeled as such on the YouTube page. The second one we covered on July the 30th. It's going to be labeled as such. And then you can just kind of follow along based on the dates of every Sunday. And we're covering a new part of the fill in the blank section. Once we complete the wound mapping section, because I've been through the journal, I'm going to tell you now, once we complete the activities for the wound mapping section, that's when it really gets good, because you start going into some of those things that you can look at within your own life and you can start putting these tools into play to start to rewrite a lot of those behavior patterns that may not be serving you. T baby, it is youtube.com/girl_dad. So essentially exactly how my name is here on TikTok, but just put an @ after the / when you put in youtube.com/@girl_dad, and it'll take you straight to that YouTube page. So today's fill in the blank activity, if we get to activity 3 and 4, I'll get to them. What I've been finding is that we're not making it past one fill in the blank activity, which again, I'm not in a rush to do this, right? I'm not in a rush to kind of rush through these. Shadow work is not a timed activity. It's not something that you have to do within a certain period of time. It's your healing journey. We're just doing this together to be a support system to one another, so I can share a little bit of additional insight on how to do shadow work and then give you some insight into reflection questions, right? But the part 3 fill in the blank activity is one that, as I was preparing notes for this, it was a little bit challenging to do notes for it, only because it's one of those activities that is going to require you to really do some reflection. I'm going to read the fill in the blank activity as it is, and I'm going to say blank where the blanks are. And then I'm going to speak to a little bit of my experience when I did this activity. And hopefully that lends you a little bit of guidance on how you can do the activity, right? So I'm going to read the fill in the blank activity. This particular fill in the blank activity is about fear. And what it's addressing is some of the fears that we've developed that has come out of our traumas. And as you do shadow work, you'll start to see the connection between your experiences and your current behavior patterns. And one of the most specific things that shadow work is trying to accomplish for us all is by going back and recognizing those experiences, really dealing with the emotions that we may have repressed or the emotions that we have not addressed in our lives, we will be able to see the connection between those unaddressed and those repressed emotions and some of the behavior patterns that do not serve us. And the idea is, if you can address those emotions and pull them out of your shadow and address them and deal with them and then heal them properly, you will be able to address the behavior patterns that came out of those repressed emotions that don't serve you. I can tell you personally, by going back and addressing a lot of the things that I've experienced in my life, whether it was just trauma or poor relationships or situations where I was poorly mistreated, I was able to identify the behavior patterns that I saw later on in my adult life that were self-sabotaging, not self-serving, and was not serving my best interest. And by doing that work, I was able to correct those behavior patterns, because what happens, those behavior patterns comes out when you are triggered, right? And you're triggered, that triggering, the way that we speak about people being triggered and how we don't really understand that is, what triggered is whatever you've repressed, whatever you've hidden, whatever you have not dealt with, someone may say or do a thing that sparks or hits that soft area that you've repressed. And then there is a behavior or a response that comes out of you being struck in that area. So by going back and addressing those areas of your life and healing and reframing and addressing them properly, next time someone does something or says something, it doesn't hit that area because you've already addressed it. Therefore, the behavior that comes forth out of you being triggered that oftentimes doesn't serve your best interest, that behavior can be rewritten now, because you're able to see when someone says that thing or does that thing that used to trigger you, you can see, oh, I see how I used to respond to that. I can now assess the information and make a better decision. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that in my notes. And it's really dope the way that I was able to frame this to kind of give us a context understanding, right? And again, everybody in the comment, Becky, I so appreciate what you're doing. A lot of times I'm not really in the comments because I'm trying to get to the information. So if you all can assist one another, those of you that have been here for the last 2 Sundays, those of you that are really grounded and rooted in what we're trying to do here, help each other out, because that's really the point of doing this together, is to be a support system to one another so that some of the more complicated parts of shadow work, we can do this together, we can support each other, and we can get through it on this healing journey together. All right. So if I'm not paying attention to the comments, I'm not ignoring you guys. I just want to really get into this information and make sure that I'm fulfilling what I'm here to do, which is to give you this information and give you the additional guidance. I will take some time to focus on the comments, but when we get to those sections, you guys will know, and I'll actually solicit your answers so that I can engage you that way. All right, so I'm going to read through the fill in the blank activity. Then I'm going to give you guys some insight into how I do the fill in the blank activities and just give you some suggestions on what you can do if you find it difficult to actually fill in these blanks. The first thing that I would suggest is get you a separate notebook as you're using the shadow work journal, because you can notice these blanks are very small. Your response and your answer may require a lot more space than that. Don't feel obligated to fit your answer on this little blank, nor when you're doing your reflection questions should you feel obligated to fit your answer in this little space. So the first thing I would recommend, and if you don't have one today, we're not going to actually do the activity because this is your shadow work. The point of this is just to give you some additional guidance on how to do the activity and give you some additional guidance on how to do the reflection questions. So you're going to have time away from this live to actually go sit back and do your own reflection to do the activity. So if you don't have a notebook right now, don't feel like you need to panic about that. But I would recommend that you have a separate notebook so that you can write out your responses freely without feeling limited by the pages or the blanks that's provided here. All right. So let's read the part 3 fill in the blank activity in the wound mapping section of the shadow work journal. Blank scares me the most. When I become scared or anxious, I tend to blank. It sometimes sucks because blank, and this makes me feel blank. My anxiety teaches me that blank and blank. I understand that I am blank, but I love myself unconditionally. I'm going to read that again and give some context into my experience in filling this out. But here's a suggestion for you. Whenever you're doing the fill in the blank activities, this is what I do, and there's no set way to do your shadow work. I'm just giving you suggestions to help you get through it, right? You might find another way that works for you, and that's perfect. But when I'm doing the fill in the blank activities, when I was doing them, I would read the blank and then put in what instantly came to my mind without thought. Whatever came to my mind first, that's what I wrote, right? And I did the entire fill in the blank activity that way first. And then once I had the entire paragraph filled in, I then went back and read it again. And then wherever there was a blank, I stopped and allowed myself to really search within myself and reflect and come up with the answer that was suffice, right? And what I found a lot of times was those two answers were different. Sometimes when I took the time to think a little bit more and to reflect back, the answer that came out was a little more in depth than the initial answer that I wrote. What I also found was the answer that came out when I reflected was more of a reflection of longer in my past experiences that I was pulling up than the answer that I gave when I did it the first time. Neither one of those answers are wrong, and you don't have to feel like you need to keep one or the other, because both are an expression of you and how you actually feel. So the things that you feel today will sometimes be exactly what you've been feeling all along, or the things that you feel about these blanks today may be much different than what you felt before. Both things may need to be addressed. So don't feel like you have to exchange one for the other. Or if you do feel like when you took the time to reflect a little bit more, the answer that you gave was more representative of a part of you that needs the work, then you keep that and you work with that. But the most important part about the fill in the blank activity is to just give you a picture of what's happening in your subconscious mind. And then the most important part after you have that picture is what you do with that picture in the reflection questions. And that's where I really think the beauty of this activity is, especially when I was making my notes. I said, oh yeah, this is going to be powerful and very helpful for everybody that's going to join today. Miss Yvonne, I'm so glad your journal arrived. I'm glad you have it. If you missed anything, go back to the YouTube page. You can catch the last 2 Sundays there. So what I want to do, thank you for the gift, the hearts. What I want to do again is just read the fill in the blank activity here. Miss BPG, thank you. I want to read the fill in the blank activity again. I want to read it a little bit slower, and I'm going to give some context to some of the things that I put there and why it was a struggle for me to figure out how to address this and kind of going over it and giving you all some additional guidance, right? So it says, blank scares me the most. And when I got to that section, it took me a while to really come up with the answer. I knew what the answer was. And the reason it took me a while, Paulie B, thank you. The reason why it took me a while is because I was trying to see if that answer was still true for me today. Because I knew what it was for me back then, but I needed to see if it was still true for me today. And I thought about it, and my answer was the same and it was consistent. And my answer was failure. Again, part of the reason why we don't do the activity together, because I don't want the information that you may hear me or someone else share to influence what you need to share. The reason why I share some of these throughout the activity is just to kind of give you all some context. What did I miss, Becky? The YouTube page address, anyone. All right, it is www.youtube.com/@ and then my name here on TikTok, girl_dad, right? www.youtube.com/@ girl_dad, the @ girl_dad. That's how you get to the YouTube page. Yeah, and it's also on my bio. Yep. So for me, when I read that, failure was what immediately came to my mind, right? But I kept thinking, like, was failure the thing that scared me the most growing up? And I kept trying to think if that connection was still true today, and it was. And when we get to the reflection question, I'm going to give you all some more insight on how I was able to work through that for myself. But yes, failure was my fear. And I've learned how to address that fear now because I've also moved into a stage of understanding how to manifest the life that I want. So I'm no longer afraid of failure because I understand that sometimes, not even sometimes, failure is a part of the process of finding success, right? But the reason why failure stood out to me and I struggled with whether that was what I was going to go with in this context is because I know why I had that fear of failure growing up. I was just trying to really look within myself to see if that connection was still real, as present as I was thinking back on it. And it was. Part of the reason why failure was a fear for me and why it scared me for so long in my life is because I was always afraid to disappoint the people that were feeding those negative images of myself into my life growing up. Right. And because they fed me so much negativity about what I wasn't going to be and what I couldn't be and what I was, I developed this sense of I had to be greater than their expectations. In developing that idea of needing to be greater than their expectations, the fear of failing meant to me that I was what they said I was. That was the connection for me, right? The connection was because I was given all of these negative ideas of who I was and what I could be, I then developed this drive that I had to prove them wrong. So my fear of failure became, if I failed, then they were right about me. Then everything that they said about me was right. And that's where that fear of failure came in for me, right? So when you kind of think of the activity, that's the idea of how you want to do it. First, be honest, right? Because it took me a while to actually put my answer there, because I just wasn't sure if that same fear, as I thought back throughout my life, if it still resonated as recent as my adult years. And the truth is, it did. Right. And it took me some time to really move into a space of understanding how to manifest the life that I wanted, that I stopped being afraid of failure, because one, I understood, and I understand now, I am who I am despite anyone else's opinion of me. Right. And then I understand now that the things that I'm going to try to do to accomplish in my life, they're going to require me stepping outside of my comfort zone, which means there's an opportunity, or there's a chance that I may fail at any new venture that I may start. And that's okay. I can accept that, because failure is a part of the process of success. But once I understood that connection of why I was afraid of failure, I understood how to then heal that part by going back and really addressing that idea of, I was fed all these negative images of myself. And my fear of failure became, if I fail at anything that I'm doing, then I am exactly who they said I was. So that's how I kind of addressed this activity, and that's how I went through it. And then when I become scared or anxious, I tend to, I'm not going to fill out the whole activity or tell you guys everything that I put in here, because I don't want the things that I say to influence what you write, right? But I just want to give you an idea of, what it is that you really want to be digging up when you're doing these activities, and how honest and transparent you have to be with yourself. It's so K2. You can go to any of the previous videos or any of the most recent videos on my page and click the link or the shopping cart on any of those videos, and you can order your copy of the journal. Or you can actually go to my website. It's www.girldadllc.com. And there's a link there where you can order the journal directly. So if it's out of stock here on TikTok, you can go to my website, www.girldadllc.com. And there's a link there where you can order the journal, even if it's out of stock on TikTok. All right. So that's how you really want to go through that fill in the blank activity. Be transparent, be open, be honest. You have to be honest. As tough as the answer may be. Now, here's the thing. If you're uncertain as to, hey, what is it that scares me the most, then just write what you're comfortable writing. Because what you're going to find is, as you go further and further into this journal, if you're really committed to doing the work, you will naturally start to be more honest with yourself and more honest with the work in the journal. But there are going to be some points where you're just uncertain, because you're not able to connect to those emotions or those thoughts. And that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong if you don't know what feeling or emotion you want to fill in any of these blanks with. That's fine. Don't stop doing the activity. Fill in the blanks as much as you can. And if there's a blank where you just don't have an answer, that you haven't tapped into a specific answer yet, that's okay. You don't have to, right? But complete the activity, because the most important part, which is what I want to get into right now, are the reflection questions. Because the reflection questions are where you're going to be developing the tools that are necessary that you can apply to your life to rewrite some of those behavioral patterns in your life. So the reflection questions for part 3, fill in the blank activities. The first question is, after you're done doing the fill in the blank activity, then you go to the reflection questions based on what you filled into these blanks. Oftentimes I use general information to give you all the insight, but I don't mind sharing with you my journey, because I'm in a place now where I really see my journey as a means of helping other people, right? What is your, Amber, we're going to get into that. Some of the notes that I have in this part are really, really Good. So I think this part of the reflection part of this is going to be great. So let's jump into it, right? So the first question is, what is my current fear? And if it were to happen, what would be the best case scenario? So if you really think about it, I thought that was a hard question to kind of deal with, because if you think of kind of looking back and reflecting on things that may have happened to you, you may not recognize the direct connection, especially for those of us that are adulting. There are things that you worry about or think about today that may not be directly attached to your trauma. And because those things are a part of your everyday life today, those fears may resonate with you more than the things that may have been produced out of your trauma. Right? So I said your current fear is likely attached to an experience that may not be directly related to trauma. As an adult, your experiences and just adulting will cause you to develop fears. But what I would recommend in dealing with this question, write that. If you have current fears that are coming out of you just being an adult, whether it be, I don't know how I'm going to pay all of these bills, or I'm worried about my kids, or I'm worried, whatever that fear is, because here's the thing, right? If shadow work is the process of dealing with emotions that you've repressed, you don't want to be in the midst of your shadow work having an emotion that's overly present in you right now, and then you repress that emotion to try to go back to deal with something else, right? So if there is a fear that you're dealing with right now, put that there, because the rest of this activity is going to help you to address and work through that fear so you can overcome it, right? The other thing that I shared in my notes is the deeper discovery is beneath the surface. A fear that's embedded in your subconscious that may be well covered by what we may describe as part of our positive traits. Now, this is something that I was tapping into a second ago when I was talking about the fear of failure for me. Because remember, a lot of these reflection questions are going to be based on what you filled into the fill in the blank activity. Now, and many of you will be able to relate to this, but in your own specific way. So for me, the fear of failure developed in me this sense that no matter what you put me into, nobody is going to work harder than me. Any job that I've ever been on, anything that you put me into and say, hey, I need the four of you to go do that. The fear of failure from my childhood experiences developed in me this drive that I am going to do everything that I can to be successful. I'm going to outwork every single person, right? Now, in my adult years, that developed in me ambition, drive, and all these other attributes that we would describe as, oh, those are positive traits. Here's the problem. The positive that's now come out of that is not the issue, but those positive traits or those things now that may be serving you in a positive way are still rooted in a negative experience. And if you're not willing to go back and address what the root of that is, the same way that there's some positive attributes that are flowing out of that experience, there's some negative things that are flowing out of that experience that are embedded in your subconscious that comes out when you're triggered. So let me give you an example of that. Because I had that fear of failure that played itself out in my adult years as I'm driven, I'm going to outwork everyone. The other part of that is because that fear of failure was rooted in negative criticism and negative words that was spoken to me, I also was not able to receive criticism very well in my adult years. Because to me, I'm already doing everything I can to outwork everybody around me. So when it came to people giving me positive feedback or even criticism that could benefit me, because this attribute of hard working and going harder than everyone else came out of a negative place, out of that negative place also came out of a very sensitive nature to receiving criticism. So oftentimes we see some positive things that we've developed in our lives that came out of the negative experiences, and we go, well, that's a good thing, but we're not recognizing the subconscious parts, the negative things that are embedded in our subconscious that also came out of those negative experiences, which is why your shadow work is important. Because if you don't go back and address whatever those experiences are for what they were and actually work through them, reframe them, speak to that part of yourself in a positive way, you may see some positive outcome in your life, but you're not consciously aware of the negative outcomes that come out of your life. So this is one of the parts where I want to solicit some answers from you all, and I'm going to read into some of your comments, and then we can kind of share and engage that way. So for some of you all, what is a current or past fear, and what would be the best case scenario? And I know, and someone said that a second ago, the best case scenario. What the question is asking there is, if that fear was to happen, what would be an outcome or a response from you that can change that fear or that situation into the best outcome, the best case scenario? And question 2 kind of goes into that a little bit, but I want to hear some of you all's answers and kind of dig into that. It can be fearful facing the shadow, so I get it. Absolutely, Yvonne. The big homie, I can't wait till you get your journal, man. You're going to love the process, brother. That's why we had to shed some light on it. Becky, you on point with that. You're on point with that. Face them and heal them. No money. And Lola, and that's not even necessarily a childhood fear. That's something that we deal with right now, right? But the next 2 questions is going to give us some insight on how to address even some of those fears that comes out of our adult years, or simply adulting, as I like to put it. Not being able to deal with the thoughts that my marriage is over, I'm now alone and starting over. Lindsay, first of all, thank you for sharing, right? And that is a very real fear that most people have to face as relationships are ending. But I'll give you this. Your life is not a result of the difficulties and the challenges that you face. Your life is going to be a result of how you respond to them. This is wherever you are in your life right now. It's a chapter that has already been written. What you're expressing is how you feel about that chapter. The beauty of this process is your book is not over. You have an opportunity to grab the pen of your life and author the rest of your book so that it reflects the outcome that you desire. So again, whatever your situation is, your life is not determined by the difficulties of the adversity that you face. Your outcome of your life is going to be determined by how you react and how you respond to it. This process of shadow work is to empower you to understand that you and the actions that you take from this point forward has more of an impact in the quality of life that you live than what has happened to you. I hope that helped, right? But this process is going to help in just working through some of those emotions. Lori said, having people pass away who I love. Lori, I can absolutely relate to that. Having lost my own 16-year-old son a little over 2.5 years ago, that was tough for me. The one thing that I would say that really helped me deal with losing my son was I was already in a place of spiritual growth, and I was already deep in doing shadow work even without this journal. So by the time I lost my son, what I anticipated, or what people around me anticipated that would come out as uncontrollable anger and rage and resentment and hatred for whomever had taken my son's life, because I was so far into my shadow work and so far into understanding how I wanted to live a life of love, I never experienced that uncontrollable rage. I never experienced that uncontrollable resentment. I never experienced the hatred. To be quite transparent with you all, I never even followed along with the case to know who, what, when, and where, because it did not matter. What was significant was, and what I took from that is, I had an opportunity to live out my life in a way that would not only make my son proud, but to live out my life in a way that I can carry on his legacy in a way that would not only make him proud, but that I would be proud of. Right? So that fear of losing people is very real. But I'll tell you, there's a certain place that you reach in not only your own shadow work, but your understanding of life and living a life in love, that you understand that no matter what happens to you, you get to a certain place of balance and a certain place in having your foundation built under you, that you may feel the emotions that you feel from loss or from fear, but they don't overtake you and they don't dictate to you what the rest of your life ought to be. And that's the important part, because the reason why we're focused on doing shadow work is because things that have happened to us in our past have been dictating to us what our life is and what our life can be. And we are trying to go back and reframe those things, reshape those things, and heal those places of ourselves so that those things that have happened to us in the past are no longer dictating to us the quality of life that we can live today. But that's very real. The fear of not being accepted. Unfortunately, it made me a huge people pleaser. Strawborn, I absolutely feel you. And that's something to work through, right? But the way that you work through that is to getting to the root of where did that start? Once you understand where that started and you speak to that part of yourself and you pour compassion and love and acceptance onto that part of yourself, you're no longer going to be triggered in those moments when you need to say no, that vulnerable part of yourself comes up and speaks up for you. Again, the things that have happened to us in the past dictating the quality of our life today. If we heal those things and heal those places that have happened to us in the past, we can then make the choices that serve our best interest today and not have those things or those triggers or those behavior patterns making those decisions for us today. Less work hours causes big fear of being home. I think it's Shinzi. I absolutely feel you. And we'll get into some of the ways that you can really start setting your mind to overcome those fears, because the fear itself paralyzes you, or it takes you into a state of behavior that may not be the best course of action, right? When you're operating out of fear, you either are paralyzed or you take a course of behavior that may not be the best course of action to address your situation, because fear doesn't allow you to see the situation for its fullness. It doesn't allow you to see the situation for what it really is, because the fear comes out of this sense of, I have to do something. I have to do something now. And it overexcites your senses, which then slows down your ability to fully assess your situation and make a decision that best serves your best interest. McKill said, dying alone. That's a big one. That's a big one, right? And without knowing your situation, I think McQuail, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Without knowing your situation, I'll give you a very simple way to address that. The fear of dying alone is something that's real for many of us that struggle with building strong, meaningful relationships. I used to be that guy. I struggled with building strong, meaningful relationships because I was always isolated as a child, and I learned how to do a lot of things by myself, for myself. The way that I've learned how to address that in my healing process is I invest in relationships that may not serve my best interest right away. Because that's what I used to do. I would only invest in relationships that served me. And when the relationship stopped serving me, I stopped investing in it, which meant people that genuinely cared about me, loved me, and wanted to be in meaningful relationships with me, when they saw this pattern, they withdrew themselves. So the way that you address that fear of dying alone and that idea of, for those of us that struggle with building strong, meaningful relationship, is to be very conscious and intentional about investing in people and investing in relationships that don't necessarily serve you in the moment. Because what you'll find is The reason you were struggling with building strong relationships, it was you. It was either your fear or it was your fear or your selfishness that made people withdraw from you. And once you stop being selfish about that or stop living in that fear and you start intentionally investing in relationships, what you'll find is people will be drawn to you because people see that you are watch this, you become a value to them. The things that you pour into them, the things that you do for them that don't necessarily serve you right now, allow people to see you as a value to them, as someone that is meaningful to them. So they draw to you and you start to build those strong, meaningful relationships in your life that will help you to deal with that fear of dying alone because you know there are people around you that genuinely love you and care for you. And more importantly, you genuinely love and care for them. Guys, it's like 50 new messages, right? So I'm going to scroll up and get to the newer messages. So if I missed your message and didn't address it, it's because you all are typing really fast. And if I keep staying where I'm at, I'm going to miss all the new messages. So I'm going to scroll up and kind of get to those. And then we'll get to question 2 after I close out my response from question 1. Clo to Soul, welcome, sis. Fear of loving someone then goes wrong. So Clo to Soul, that's beautiful. And I'm going to tell you something. Most of us experience that in relationships. Here's how I address that. And I said this in one of my other videos, in a video posted on my page. I recognize that my love is not to be coveted for specific relationships. I'm going to say that again. My love, yes, intimacy that I share with my partner, that is specific to that relationship. But generally, loving people is not something that I reserve and covet for specific relationships anymore. I love on everybody, even the people that are intentionally trying to cause hardship in my life. I don't give them the opportunity to impact my life in a way that's going to be detrimental to my well-being, but I love on them too. And here's the thing. Once you learn to love as just a part of your life, that fear of the expectation on the return goes away. Because the fear is I'm going to give you what you're not willing to give me back in return. Right? That's really where the fear of loving someone then it goes wrong is, because if I live in a life where I'm constantly giving of my love and I know that my love is not to be coveted, but I have an endless supply of that love because I live in it, right? Then the expectation of you giving it back to me is no longer dependent on what I give you. So if I love you and you run off and do something crazy, fine. I'm cool with that because me giving you my love was not contingent, or it was not conditional upon you loving me back. That's just how I live my life. I live my life in love, right? Now, here's what happened, Clo to Soul, when you start living like that. You start attracting other people that live like that. You start attracting people that are going to love you the way that you love because they see that in you. Like they say, misery loves company. All of the other great attributes, love loves company, right? People that love genuinely love the company of people that are going to love them genuinely. So you start to attract to you the way that you are living and the things that you are projecting out of your love. Sandra said fear of rejection. That's something that I dealt with, Sandra, and I think we talked about it a little bit earlier when I was giving you all this idea of even the way that I used to deal with criticism. Because my drive and my ambition, my ability to outwork everybody else came out of being told all my life that I wasn't going to be anything, and the fear of failure was based on not wanting to prove those people wrong, it also came out that when people would give me criticism, I was very sensitive to receiving that, which was harmful to me. So having to go back and address that initial part of what was spoken into me and knowing that I no longer had to try to outbeat their negative comments or their negative projections on my life, I could now receive criticism in a way that would actually serve me. And it's the same thing for rejection. That fear of rejection is sometimes rooted in whatever rejection we face either in our childhood or in that relationship. Once you address that initial fear and you let yourself know that, hey, you're still good enough even if what you put forth is rejected in this situation, that is not a reflection of who you are. That's just a reflection of what is being put forth. Then you embrace rejection as, hey, this is a part of life. I don't have to fear being rejected. And I'll be honest with you all, there's still a part of me that physically fears that physically deals with the fear of rejection. And I'll share this and then I'll flip back up again because there's 26 new comments. As you may be able to gather, I do public speaking. Even now, when I get in front of a group of people to speak, my body goes through this, I forget the word for it, but I go through this sense of over preparation and this anxiety of how what I'm going to say is going to be received. Mentally, I know what I'm going to say. Mentally, what I'm saying is coming out of where I stand, foundational information that I know to be true to me. Physically, my body still goes through this overheating process because of the fear of how what I'm going to say is going to be received. Even though I know, like, I'm here to speak to these people because they desire to hear what I have to say, and what I have to say is going to benefit them, I still physically go through that. So it's a process. Even when you've reached a certain level of healing, being able to recognize those places in your life and still knowing they need work is just as important, because none of us is ever going to get to a point where it's like, I'm 1,000% good. It's a constant work in recognizing some things you learn to live with, other things you go back and address. Blissful Greatness says fear that you'll never be good enough. I promise you, right? When you get your journal, if you already have your journal, if you go back to the wound mapping part of this, all of these fears that we're talking about is right here in the wound mapping. It's rooted in something that you've experienced already in your life. And being able to identify where that fear comes from is how you can go back and address it, right? Pull up the emotions that you've repressed, because that's what's producing that fear in you. When you can go back and figure out what that area is, what happened, who was I encountering with, when did this happen to me, and then address that part of yourself. Once you've done that, you'll see that that fear is not jumping out of your subconscious when you're triggered by something, or when you're triggered by someone, or when you're triggered by something that's being said. Yeah, you can have bits of all four areas, Blissful Greatness. Absolutely, right? Because I share some of the traits in the different areas as well. So let's go into reflection questions, and we'll go to the second question. Actually, let me close out the third thing that I wrote in my notes. And we're dealing with the question that says, what is my current fear? And if it were to happen, what would be the best case scenario? Hey, Becky, I didn't know that I had to approve these, surveys that you're putting up. So I've just been tapping off of them. But if I need to approve them and hit start, let me know. And if I don't, keep doing what you're doing. Okay, I don't. Great, cool. So the last thing that I wrote is the fear of failure. And I kind of explained this in detail a little bit. The fear of failure drives me to be the hardest worker in any setting. That's a positive attribute based out of fear. I can keep the attribute and address the fear that I'm not a failure, right? So the second question is, if my fears and anxieties were teachers, what lessons would they teach me? And I love this part. I absolutely love this part because it allowed me to explore into something that I talk about all the time, which is your emotions are designed to give you information and not directions. Your emotions are designed to give you information and not directions. Too often, when we've experienced trauma, or when we haven't dealt with or we haven't learned how to regulate our emotions because we were in environments where people didn't teach us those skills, or people didn't allow us to express our emotions, we become hypersensitive to those emotions. And whenever triggered, we act upon those emotions. And then we end up regretting the very thing that we did or that we said. That's because your emotions are not designed to give you directions. And I had a great analogy when I was in the shower a second ago. Think of your emotions as a military missile defense system, right? Think of your emotions as a military missile defense system. Imagine that when the alarm goes off at the base where this military missile defense system is, when the alarm goes off, they don't automatically start shooting missiles out in the air. When the alarm goes off, they assess information that the system is providing them. Upon assessing the information that the system is provided, then they make the decision. A, okay, are there actual missiles being shot at our nation that we need to shoot off these defense missiles? B, are shooting off whatever set off the alarm, does it require us to actually shoot missiles, or can we send some fighter planes to actually address it? Or C, is the alarm a false alarm? Did something actually trigger the alarm, but it does not require us to go all out and start shooting off missiles? Most of us, because of either traumatic experiences or we were never allowed to express our emotions, so we never learned how to gauge, regulate, understand them. Whenever our emotions go off, which is the alarm, we just start shooting off missiles everywhere. That's the trigger, right? The minute we're triggered, we just, send in all the forces, when in reality, the alarm is just information. When the alarm goes off, you're supposed to go, okay, I recognize that something isn't right, because my alarm system, your emotions are warning you that something isn't right. At that point, you are to sit back and assess the information or assess the situation, what's being said to you, what's being done to you. From that assessment, because sometimes here's the thing, you can do the assessment and recognize that what you feel is accurate, right? But your response has to be well thought out enough to get you the result that you want. For example, if you're angry, something upsets you, and you simply act on that anger without thinking it out to get the result that you wanted, you expressed yourself being angry and you acted out on it, but more often than not, you probably will cause yourself more harm by acting out of that anger rather than assessing, okay, this is what has been done to me that has caused me to be angry. I acknowledge that I'm angry. I assess within myself why I'm angry, and in my assessment, I'm accurate. Whatever is being done to me is intentionally being done to me. Now, what is the response that's going to serve my best interest? Do I, in this moment, not respond right here? I'll give you an example, right? We went to the soccer game. My job gave us some tickets. We went to the soccer game, right? As we're leaving the soccer game, there's a young lady on her phone, and she's explaining to someone why she got sent home from work. And in what she's explaining, she was extremely loud. And yes, y'all, I ear hustle a lot because it's a part of what I do in public. I read people, I read situations, it informs me. So yes, I ear hustle. Don't judge me. But anyway, she was extremely loud, so it was easy to hear her. But she was explaining to someone on the phone why she was sent home from work. And essentially what she was explaining was somebody at work had said something to her, and the person, whatever they said, upset her enough that she felt the need to address it right there in the moment. And the way that she addressed it out of her anger, that person is still at work and she got sent home. That's what I mean by assessing the information. Just because your assessment actually tells you, yes, what happened to you is accurate, or what you're feeling is being done to you is accurate, does not mean acting out of that feeling is going to get you the best result that serves your best interest. So again, your emotions are designed to give you information and not directions, right? But let's go into answering this question directly, because I also have some really great notes that I want to dig into as well. So I wrote, when we've experienced trauma, the need to protect ourselves from repeating the trauma again causes us to be hypersensitive to our emotions, and we can act on them instead of receiving information from them, which is what I just kind of went into. The third thing that I wrote is, and we're answering the question, if my fears and anxieties were teachers, what lessons would they teach me? The third thing that I wrote is, fear and anxiety as teachers speak to you about your subconscious. They are telling you what is beneath your surface that you should address. Here's what I mean by that. When you're fearful of a thing, right? Yes, sometimes the fear can be imminent. It can be right there in front of you. You see it. Okay, this is happening right now. I'm afraid or I'm anxious about it. That's one part of it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that feeling of anxiety and fear that comes from within when there's not something imminently in front of you that's causing you a physical threat. The reason why you have to listen to your fear and your anxiety sometimes as a teacher, because they're pointing you to something that is in your subconscious mind that you may not be consciously aware of and dealing with. So if you find yourself in a constant state of fear and there is no imminent threat right there in front of you, what that emotion is trying to do is inform you that there is something hidden back here in the shadows, in the sense, which is why it's called shadow work, because you're dealing with things that are in your subconscious mind and not things that you're consciously aware of on a daily basis. But what that fear or that anxiety is trying to make you aware of is that there's something within the subconscious mind, in the shadows of your thinking, that is embedded there, that keeps raising itself up to make you aware. And if you don't go back and actually address that thing and do this shadow work using whatever tool you have, I find this journal to be a great tool, which is why we're using it. But if you don't go back and find a means to address whatever that fear is, it's going to keep trying to give you that information. So your fear and your anxiety, if there's no imminent threat in front of you, a lot of times is just trying to teach you, hey, there's something going on in our subconscious that we have not addressed that is causing us to feel this way. And a lot of times, if you find yourself in a situation where your medical professional has prescribed you medicine to deal with your fear and anxiety, I will never try to speak outside of what any medical professional has given you as far as advice or any prescription or anything like that. Here's what I would ask you though. If you've been prescribed medication for fear and anxiety, have they also spoken to you about finding out the root of that fear and anxiety? Because here's what medication does. Medication addresses the symptoms of the fear and anxiety, but it never takes you back to why does this keep coming up? Why does this keep coming up? If you never go to the root that is in your subconscious, whether it be through your experiences, no, they just throw the pills at you, right? Like you have to go to the root of what happened to me that keeps causing this fear and anxiety to arise in my life. If you never go back and do the shadow work to address that, to reframe that, and to speak to that part of yourself, to make yourself whole in that moment, then you're always just going to be treating the symptoms and never actually dealing with the root of the problem, which is again why shadow work is so important, right? Treat symptoms, creates new ones, but doesn't address the root cause of those anxieties. Absolutely, Yvonne, you're right on it, right? So that's why you wanted. So some people say, I control my emotions. No such thing. You don't control your emotions. The goal is not to control your emotions. The goal is to regulate your emotions. And what that means is understanding what they are for. You get the information that your emotions are providing you, you make an accurate assessment of the situation, and then you make the decision that serves your best interest. But you can't control your emotions. Attempting to control your emotions is going to do two things to you. It's going to shut down your ability to actually listen to your defense system, which is what your emotions are built into. It's a part of your defense system. And if you're trying to control your emotions because you think that's the way to stop the behavior patterns that don't serve you, you're just shutting down and repressing again. And the whole point of shadow work is to pull up those things that you've repressed, right? So to that question, if my fears and anxieties were teachers, what lessons would they teach me? What you want to do when you're dealing with that question in the process of dealing with this fill in the blank activity, you want to see what they're pointing to. They're pointing you to something in your subconscious mind. They're trying to make you aware that there's something within the shadows of your subconscious that is not sitting well with us feeling. There it is. There's something within the shadows of your subconscious that is not sitting well with us feeling safe. And until you address what that event is, or what that circumstance is, or what that interaction is, or what that trauma is, your defense mechanism and your defense system is always going to do its job, which is continue to tell you, hey, there's something back here that is hindering us from feeling safe. It doesn't matter. You can drink all you want. You can do all the drugs you want recreationally, right? You're still not going to stop your defense system from making you aware that, hey, there's still something here that's making us unsafe, which does what? You keep doing the same cycle. I'm going to drink it away. Once you sober up again, what happens? I'm still unsafe. You can try to get as high as you want to. Once you sober up again, what happens? I'm still unsafe, right? So until you actually get to the root of that thing, and actually go back and do that work and actually face that part of yourself that's constantly telling you, I'm unsafe. Every time I see a certain behavior, I feel unsafe. That's the trigger. Every time I hear someone say things a certain way, I feel unsafe. That's the trigger. You have to go back to what is it within your subconscious that is being triggered that keeps setting off your alarm system to tell you, hey, I'm anxious about this or I'm unsafe about this. And a lot of times, for those of us that deal, for example, the anxiety of public speaking, that you can find that in, especially if you kind of had those childhood traumas, you can find that in your being allowed to have a voice as a child, your voice being respected, your voice being heard, you being comfortable to know that I can express myself and it's okay. I was going to go into a story about why we raise my daughter the way that we do. But I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get to this third question and maybe we'll get to it. Or I'll give you a shortened version of this. Zori is a very unique little girl. I mean, from the moment that she got here, she almost, not even almost, she's always exhibited a sense of having information that was beyond her age. She's only 3. The way that she thinks, processes, communicates, the things that she will say unprompted gives me a good, clear idea that she has information that's beyond her years here on this earth, right? Knowing that about her, I know that in a world where young women and women in general are not allowed to exist fully in their autonomy and to be respected, I'm not going to be the first person, or I'm not going to be the type of dad that tries to quell or shut down that part of her because it makes me uncomfortable. That's a whole nother conversation, right? We've had the parenting conversation before. But so if you kind of watch Zori, she's very expressive. That's intentional, right? Because allowing her to know that her voice has value now will help her later on to know that her voice has value. Because many of us understand that in our upbringing, when we didn't have a voice and we was told to shut up, be seen and be seen and not heard, all of those things are some of the things that develop these traumas in us now to where we're afraid to speak in public, or we're afraid of people rejecting what we're going to say, or we're afraid of people disagreeing with us. So for us, we're very intentional about some of the things that I teach and allow her to do, because I understand that from me working through a lot of the processes in my experience, here's why shadow work is absolutely important, right? you unknowingly traumatize your children and those that you love out of your own unhealed trauma, not even intentionally. Because if you really, part of shadow work, once you start going back and revisiting some of your traumatic experiences as a child, you'll see that your peoples, your parents, or whoever those people were operating out of their own unhealed trauma. And that's the part of the healing process, is recognizing it wasn't me. I wasn't a bad kid. They just didn't know how to deal with children. They just didn't know how to deal with my unique presentation as a child, because they had their traumas that were unhealed and they projected that on me. So for us that are going through this process, that's why it's so important, so that we're not projecting our trauma on our children and on the loved ones and those people that depend on us and those people that are around us, right? All right. So again, if my fears and anxieties were teachers, what lessons would they teach me? To address that question, when you're doing your own reflection, when you're doing the reflection questions in this section, you want to look at what are those fears and anxieties pointing you to, the root of it, right? Think of when did this start for me? What triggered this idea that I'm afraid to do this, or that I get anxious about this? And when you can go back to that thing, then the next question will help you out on how to address that. So the next question is, how can I build a more positive outlook on the unknown future? So this particular question, well, let's do this. I want to hear some of you all's responses, right? From all that we've discussed and really talking about anxiety and talking about fear, what would you say are ways on how you can build a more positive outlook on the unknown future? And I'll address some of those, and then I'll go into some of my notes. Radical acceptance. I love that. Great. Yo, radical acceptance is that I am who I am, and not that toxic acceptance of I am who I am and I don't need to change the things about me. Not that, but that acceptance of yourself in the sense of the things that they didn't accept about me, I'm going to accept about me, right? The things that I need to change that aren't serving my best interest, I'm going to work on for me. The thought of the future gives me so much anxiety. Kimmy, we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you some tools on how to address that. When I get into my notes, I'm going to give you some tools about how to address the thoughts about the future. Because many people experience that. And I used to experience that. But I learned how to address that and how to put that in a proper perspective, so I'm not living in the fear of the future, because the fear of the future paralyzes you today. Because in that fear of the future, it paralyzes you so that you're not authoring things and doing things today to give you the best outcome tomorrow. And when you understand that you have the power to write and conduct yourself in a way today to give you the outcome that you desire tomorrow, you no longer have to fear tomorrow. Tawan said, oh, you're saying thanks, looking forward to new growth. Enola said, being present with myself. Absolutely. Yvonne said, learning to focus on the now, which isn't easy. We're going to talk about that. And that's a good part. Focusing on the now. Because if you focus on the now and you are accountable to the actions that you're taking right now, the fear of the future goes away. I have some really great notes about this because I went through a lot of experiences with the fear of the future, because I felt, and part of my fear of the future came out of, in my upbringing, I had no control over what happened to my life. And I was just an outcome or the result of everybody else's actions. And it wasn't until I understood that this is my life. There are things that I can do today to secure the outcome that I want tomorrow. But we'll get into that when we get to the notes. Radical and unconditional self-love, no matter the season in life. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because every season serves you. Even your lowest points in life, they serve you. And if you're not aware that life is about the experience and not necessarily some preconceived societal destination that you've been told you have to achieve, Once you understand that every day you wake up and experience this life, you have accomplished what you're supposed to, but also in the experiencing of this life, you are authoring today the chapter of your life for tomorrow. Detaching from the outcome. I like that. Learning how to detach. Analysis paralysis, where I'm not moving forward. Tawandra, that one of my old business partners, hold on, let me read this one first. I got to come back and re-listen to this. It's going to be on YouTube. As soon as we get off of here, if not by this evening, at some point tonight, it's going to be on the YouTube page with the other videos from the last previous Sundays where you can consume this and we can get into it. But one of my former business partners used to tell me I had analysis paralysis because we would have an idea and I would have my portion of what I was responsible for, and I would try to drill it to make sure it was absolute perfect. And when he called me out at the time, I didn't recognize what it was. But in doing my own shadow work, I realized the reason I was so strung on being perfect is because I was criticized and critiqued so much as a child that I was afraid of failing, which we talked about. I was afraid of things not being exactly how they were supposed to be because somebody's going to trigger those old emotions, or somebody's going to call me or see me as what those people saw me as. It's taking me years to let go of the upbringing, like you said, but it's definitely changed. Absolutely, Lupita. Absolutely. How do I go about getting the shadow work journal? So if it's not available here on TikTok, because it sells out just about every single day, you can go onto my website, www.girldadllc.com. And there's a link there where you can get the journal directly, and it's never sold out through that link because it's directly associated with the production of it. I can totally relate to that, Girl Dad. Yvonne, that thing used to and what it also would do is it kept me from moving on opportunities that I had because it wasn't perfect. It wasn't exactly how I needed it to be. And I had to learn that you got to move, right? You got to move. The YouTube is /@girl_dad. All right, so it's www.youtube.com/the @girl_dad. And that's how you get to the YouTube page to watch these. So I want to go into some of the notes that I took because this part was really great for me. And the question was, how can I build a more positive outlook on the unknown future? Accountabilities of my actions today. I've learned that my internal fears are most times rooted in the actions or the lack thereof that I'm taking today. Accountability of my actions today is one of the most impactful ways that I can address that positive outcome, or that I can address that fear that most of us have of the future. Because what's really happening, if we're sitting down and being honest with ourselves, right? Even and someone mentioned this earlier about even financial anxiety. A lot of times our anxiety comes out of the actions or the lack thereof that we're taking today. We're creating the opportunity for this anxiety to exist because of what we're doing or what we're not doing that we know we should be doing. So accountability to your action today is one of the ways that you can have an impact on that fear of the future or that outlook on the unknown future. Do what you need to be doing today. Develop the discipline to do the things that you need to be doing today. Don't wait on it. Don't be a sloth. Don't be a slacker. You have to be accountable of knowing that if I handle my business today and I know I did everything that I was supposed to do today, it lessens that fear of the things that are unknown about the future because you handled your business. Right? So the second thing that I wrote is, I'm no longer a victim of life, but a curator. I'm the author of my life. The idea of the fear of the future sometimes is rooted in this thought that things are just happening, right? And things are just happening to me. That's not the reality. One of the books that one of the books that I'm actually going to work on next, and it's going to be part of the next lives that we do, and it's actually from the same author, I'll save that for later. But it talks about understanding that most of us are manifesting the life that we're living right now unintentionally. And we're also contributing to the life that we're going to be living in the near future unintentionally, because we see ourselves as life happening to us when that's not the reality. A lot of times our religious foundations put us in this state of paralysis where we don't know that we have the power. You are curating the life you're living right now, and more importantly, you're curating through your actions the life that you're going to be living. It starts with your perception. If you see yourself as just a victim of life happening to you, you're always going to have anxiety about the future because you have no control over what's going to happen. But two things. If one, you understand that life is to be experienced. There's not a destination that you ought to get to, and now you have it. Every day of experiencing this life is a part of the purpose of why you're here. The second part is life is not happening as a means of just happening to you, right? Everything that happens, as Blissful Greatness said, if you look at it as happening for you, and I know we hear that a lot and we don't understand really the context or the nuance of what that means. What it means is even the negative things that are happening in my life right now, if I can obtain from them the lessons that are necessary that I can apply to my life to be better, then those things have happened for me because they've given me information that helps me to curate the next steps of my life to make them better. But you cannot see yourself as a victim of life. You are a curator of your life. You have the pen in your hand. And you're absolutely right, Blissful Greatness. If you're stuck on the negative thoughts of everything just happening to you, it's going to keep happening to you. I remember a while ago, like almost a year or so ago, I made a post that said, if you believe that every time something good happens to you, something negative happens, that's always going to happen because you're curating that reality for yourself through your perception, through your actions, and through your words. You're curating that reality for yourself. So again, you cannot see yourself as a victim of life. You're the curator of your life. You have the pen. The actions that you're taking today are writing the story that are going to be your life tomorrow. All right. And the last thing that I wrote, understanding that by my creative faculties, I am able to manifest the life that I desire. Optimism is an energy that is projected and then attracts. I'll read that again and then I'll dig into it. Understanding that by my creative faculties, I am able to manifest the life that I desire. Optimism is an energy that is projected and then it attracts. So here's what I mean by your creative faculties. Your thoughts, your feelings, and not just anger, sad, no. How you actually feel about your thoughts, your words, and your actions are your creative faculties. There is nothing that is tangible that you can touch on this planet that man has created that did not come out of those creative faculties. Our entire life, watch this, and I'm going to say this and then I'm going to show you where the instant objection that you may have had, which is legit, does not make this statement untrue. Our entire life is a reflection of those 4 creative faculties. Even the things that were done to you that was unwarranted, that you had nothing to do with, that you probably didn't even deserve, even with those things being considered, how you thought of those things, how you continue to feel about those things, how you speak about those things, and how you acted in reaction to those things are still the result of your life today. Let me give you an example. I'm going to use a very personal example. When I lost my son, I had one very clear path in front of me. Raise all hell. Whoever did this, I'm throwing everything about life away, and I'm going to find this person, and I'm gonna exact every bit of revenge on this person. That was a path in front of me. I never felt that, right? Because I was already in the midst of shadow work and actually learning the process of living in love. But that path was in front of me. The other path that was in front of me was, I can take this event and let it propel me to a place where I am the greatest father that I can be to my daughter, because I understand the value of how much my children mean to me and my child meant to me. And I'm going to pour into my daughter as much as I can. I'm going to let this propel me to go after every dream and aspiration that I had, so that I can build a foundation that will be in my son's name, so that his legacy will live on in a way that it helps other young men that could possibly be in that situation to never be in that situation again. And I can let his memory and his life be a positive reminder to me whenever I need a boost. I decided, out of the most traumatic event that happened to my life, I decided to apply my creative faculties in such a way that the outcome from that event has been nothing but positive in my life. That's what I mean by there's nothing in your life that is not a result of how you use your 4 creative faculties. Even the things that happen to you that are outside of your control. How you apply your creative faculties to those things determine the outcome in your life. There are people that have experienced some of the most traumatic things, whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be physical abuse, all types of things. And I get it. Those things are very traumatic and very hard to deal with, very hard to sit with. But the part of this shadow work and doing shadow work is you using your creative faculties to go back and address those things in such a way that the outcome is not what the outcome sometimes is for people that experience those things, which is it continues a negative cycle in your life. Right? So the way that you apply your creative faculties to things that have happened to you will always determine the outcome. So when you think of how can I build a more positive outlook on the unknown future, first of all, how you're processing the things that are happening to you today and understanding how to apply your creative faculties. So first, your mind, your thoughts. Oftentimes, because of things that have been embedded in our subconscious mind, we don't really know how to control some of our thoughts, right? Some of these thoughts, they're just coming. Whether it be negative thoughts, they just come, right? The way that you combat your thoughts is with one of your other creative faculties, your words. When you have thoughts that do not serve your best interest, you ought to speak what you desire, because your words are more powerful than your thoughts. And I've gone through this step with people before. It's a very simple step to understand. Watch this. If you think something about me, but you never speak it, it's less impactful. If you think something about me and you speak it, it's more impactful. This is how you measure the power between your words and your thoughts. Your thoughts are not more impactful than your words. That is why when your thoughts do not align with what you desire, you ought to speak what you desire. Because your words, as we are told, life and death is in the power of your words, because your words actually vibrate a stronger energy than your thoughts can. Here's another part. What's more powerful than your words? Your actions. To the same example, if you think something about me and you simply say it, that has an impact, right? And your words or you speaking it is an action. But if you think a thing about me and you say it and then you take actions upon what you think, it's more powerful that your actions than what you just simply said. In the same regards, that's how you should be using your creative faculties. If you are thinking a thing that's contrary to what you desire for your future, you need to speak the contrary. When you're speaking the contrary, your actions also need to align with what you desire for your future. This is how you use your creative faculties. Now, here's where your feelings, or not just anger or sad, but no, your feelings towards what you think and what you speak and what you do, here's how that plays into your creative faculties. Because if you speak a thing, but you don't believe it, it has less of an impact. If you speak a thing about your future, but you don't believe it wholeheartedly, which is that feeling part of it, it has less of an impact. But that is how you use your 4 creative faculties to get the life that you want. And by using those 4 creative faculties, you reduce your stress about the unknown future because you're already putting in the work as the curator to write out what that future is going to be for yourself. And then lastly, I said, optimism is an energy that is projected and then it attracts. For too long, people have had this idea of being optimist or being pessimist, and we just think of it as, oh, it's just a way of being. No, it's not. Optimism and pessimism is right tied into those creative faculties that we just talked about. That is the feeling part of it that I'm telling you about, right? Because if you speak a thing and you're pessimistic about the thing that you spoke, you just yourself limited and reduced the energy in your own words because you didn't believe it. So when you think of optimistic people, it's no surprise that good things seem to always happen to them, even when it seems like everything else around them is going in haywire. That's because they have captured an understanding of the energy that is required to put your creative faculties to work. Optimism is an energy that is projected, and once you project it, the world returns it back to you. Optimism is the feeling that takes your creative faculties and make them more impactful. It's not just, oh, I'm a pessimist. Yeah, bad things are going to continue to happen to you. You're never going to find a pessimist that says, I believe the worst thing is going to happen every single time, and guess what? It never does. Think about it. If you believe the worst thing is going to happen every single time and it never does, over time, you're going to stop believing that the worst thing is going to always happen because the evidence is going to show you over time that it doesn't happen, so you stop believing that. But the reason why a pessimist is truly a pessimist is because as they believe the worst thing is always going to happen to them, it always does. So it reinforces the belief of why they will continue to be a pessimist. The reason why an optimist is always a continued optimist, unless, of course, they get deviated from the path and something does not go right, and now they feel like, oh, I can't be this way. But oftentimes, people that are optimistic is because the evidence of their life has proven to them, I believe it's going to be good. And guess what? It's going to be good. Even in the situation where things are going haywire, they believe it's going to work out for their best interest. That's actually one of my affirmations. No matter what is happening in my life, no matter how the direction is going, for what I desire, one of my affirmations is this situation is going to turn out even exceedingly beyond what I think the best result will be. I speak that into every situation in my life. No matter what's happening, no matter what it looks like, I never focus on just what it looks like in front of me. I speak into it what I know is going to be. That is, for me, it's going to exceed even the best outcome that I can imagine for myself. And I speak that into it, and then I put behind it the feeling of believing what I just said. And any thought in my head that is contrary to what I just spoke, I speak against that thought. Why? Because my thoughts are not more powerful than my words. Because those thoughts that come out of your subconscious mind is a part of your experiences. A lot of times it's a part of the trauma. And your subconscious mind, that computer hard drive, has been conditioned and programmed to think this way. The way that you reprogram it, which is the large part of shadow work, is by then speaking into it the positive things that you now want this program to run. So if your program runs negative thoughts all the time, the only way that you're going to rewire that programming is to start doing some that's speaking into it. So every time a situation arises and your mind automatically produces that negative thought, you need to speak a positive thought into it. And over time, through conditioning, that file opens, negative thoughts come out, you put a positive thought in. The situation ends, you close that file in your subconscious, right? The next time something happened, that file's open, a negative thought comes out, you put a positive thought in. It closes. Over time, when a situation happens that opens that file is now filled with positive thoughts and positive experiences. And it's not easy, Kimmy. It's practice. The easy part is knowing that you have the ability to do the work. The hard part is, in the midst of that situation, doing the work. But you have to be committed to the work, because nothing is going to come. Like, here's what we need to understand when it comes to like shadow work and reframing and reconditioning your subconscious mind. For many of us, we've been this way for however many years you've been this way. It's not going to happen overnight. And that is why sometimes when people are of a religious foundation and they believe that by a snap of a finger, everything in their life can change, they suffer when they revert back to old behaviors, because that's not how it works. It's a process, but you have to be willing to do the work for you, right? And a part of shadow work is not just going back and reframing, because once you reframe that thing, there's still emotions that are attached to that initial experience. So every time something triggers that emotion again, you have to speak into it. Like I said, that file analogy just came up with it, but that was a good one. Every time that file is opened by a situation that reminds you of that situation and a negative thought comes out of it, you ought to put a positive thought in it. And if you keep doing that in your life, what you're going to find is there's going to come a point where something happens and that file opens, no more negative thoughts are in there. Only the positive reframed thoughts that you put in there. And that's all we can do, Kimmy, is keep trying. But trying and doing is different, right? And part of this work is knowing the power of your language. So when I say I'm trying about something that I can do, I am then in, watch this, the same way that a traumatic experience embedded thoughts in your subconscious mind that just comes up as an automatic reaction. That's why your words are able to rewrite your subconscious mind, because you have that power to speak to that part of yourself. So if I can do a thing and I tell myself I'm trying, what I've done is I've put a file in my subconscious mind that says it's okay that I don't do this thing. I get it. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not criticizing that this can be complicated. But what I'm saying is start with your words. Your words are easy. You can speak them, you can write them, you can type them. Start with your words, right? Because if you can tell me I'm going to, you just deposited that into your subconscious file. I'm going to. I can do this. I'm going to do this. And even at the times where it becomes complicated, I'm going to push through those complications and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to keep striving because I know the outcome is going to be what I desire. Nothing is going to stop me. Nothing is going to hinder me from achieving this peace and this wholeness that I want in my life. I'm going to make it through this journey. I'm going to make it on. You know why? I want you to think of this. This world has been shaped by words. Every notable person throughout history started whatever movement they had with words, because words are the vibration that speak to the being that you are. So what you have to do is first guard your words. And if you can learn to speak to yourself that which you desire, ultimately you will change your thinking. And then if you can learn and condition yourself to act in the means that's going to serve that which you desire, ultimately you start writing the life that you want for yourself. So that's essentially part 3 of the fill in the blank activity. Again, I think it was much better to do it this way, where we didn't have the journal on here and we can just talk freely, and I can kind of tell you guys where to go watch these videos, and we can talk freely. And I think we're going to do it this way going forward. if you tapped into here and you kind of knew what we were talking about, but you didn't know what we were talking about, you're trying to figure out what this is all about. It's about the Shadow Work Journal, and it's a tool that we are all using to go on this healing journey together. It's a process. I've been on this journey for over 20 years of my life, and I say over 20 years because it started when I was around 19, and I had an experience with religion that had a significant impact on my life. But in that experience, I still had, everything didn't sit right with me, right? And then after that, I started to have experiences in life, things happening to me. But from that point, I knew that I was able to take control of my life in a way that up until that point, I never did. I was simply a result of what was done to me and what happened to me. And the idea of doing shadow work in the way that we're doing it is really taking back the pen of your life and you writing out the outcome that you desire instead of your traumatic events or your traumatic experiences or experiences in general dictating to you the behavior patterns that you're going to display, the triggers that come out of you, and then ultimately dictating what your life is, right? So that's why we're doing this work. I am overwhelmed by the responses that I see from so many people that share their story of what their journey has been, what they've been through. But I'm also inspired and encouraged to hear so many people that are willing to do the work necessary to produce not only the best version of themselves that they can be, but to actually produce the life that we want. One of the foundations that I'm going to tell you all as we go down this journey, and I'll figure out a way to start incorporating this part into it. For me, the strongest foundation that has helped me to accelerate my shadow work is being determined that I'm going to live a life of love. My understanding that the piece of infinity that I am is here to be an expression of love and to experience life has allowed me to really go through shadow work in a way where I can let go of resentment because it only slows down your work. I can let go of hatred. I can let go of anger towards people. Yes, I get angry. Yes, I get upset, but I don't sit there and hold on to it. I recognize it. I go, okay. Is this feeling valid? It is. Okay. I'm going to take this feeling information and set it aside now and make the decision that serves my own best interest. And I'll tell you, not embracing love and embracing anything other than love. And people think when we talk about love, like I'm encouraging you to be a pushover. It's 5:33 too. That's exactly 2 hours. Perfect place to start closing. And I think a perfect place to close at. So I've seen in some of the comments of the shadow work videos that have really gone viral about this work that we're doing and this journey that we're taking together, where people say things like, oh man, you're just encouraging people to be a pushover. No, I'm empowering people to not allow someone else's actions control them. The pushover is the person that has so much lack of their own identity and so much lack of their own emotional regulation that someone else's actions dictate how they move, what they say, how they feel, and how they live. That's a pushover. What we're doing on this healing journey is saying we've seen how other people's actions from our past have been dictating to us how we act, how we behave, how we respond, and how we live. We're no longer accepting that as the life for us. So we're going back and addressing and understanding what took place, reframing some of those things, speaking life and compassion and love to ourselves, and healing properly so that those places within us, within our past, are no longer dictating to us who we are today. And then in that process, recognizing that I am the author of the next parts of my life. And what I'm going to use as a part of this writing is the love and compassion for myself. But I'm also going to understand, listen, if you do me wrong, there are definitely actions that I'm going to take to make sure that you don't have the access to do that again, but I'm not going to hate you. I don't have space in me to harbor hatred. I just don't. I don't have the capacity. Put it like this. I don't have the capacity to take the weight of hatred and put it on my back to where I'm going in my life. I don't have room for it. So when you're done, whatever it is you think you're doing to me, when I acknowledge it and understand it, I'll make the proper spacing and make the proper decision to not give you that. But I'm not going to harbor hatred towards you. That's too much weight for me to carry. Where I'm going, the life of light and love that I'm going to live and that I'm building for myself does not have space for hatred for you. Sorry. That does not make you a pushover. It gives you control of your life. It gives you the opportunity to be the author of your life and your actions and the way that you feel about the life that you're living. But I appreciate you all joining. This is our third Sunday going through the Shadow Work Journal. If you have not gotten your copy of the journal, you can go to any of the videos, any of the last few videos on my page, follow the link, get you a copy. If it's sold out here on TikTok, you can go to my website, www.girldadllc.com. There's a link there where you can order the journal. I will be back next Sunday. What time? What time next Sunday? Let's see who knows. What time next Sunday are we back? 3:33. Come on. 3:33. We'll be back next Sunday at 3:33. And you know what? I'll talk about why 3:33 next Sunday. Somebody remind me. When we start, if I don't start talking about it, somebody remind me and I'll talk about it. Cassandra, if you're at work, don't stress it. You can go to the YouTube page, Eastern Time, www.youtube.com/@girl_dad and catch all these videos. So by the end of tonight, this one will be up on YouTube. The two from the previous Sundays are up there. Again, I know we didn't do shadow work essentially, that's not the point of this live. This live is to just give you the additional guidance, but I will always recommend once you're done with a section in the book, just how we started with a breathing grounding activity, do a grounding activity as well, right? I do something totally different when I get off of these lives. A lot of times, like I'll go shower or I'll actually go watch, I'll watch something a little lighthearted because a lot of this is work, right? But whatever helps you to ground when you're done doing your shadow work, do that. So again, I appreciate you all being here. We're going to keep doing these until we work our way through the entire journal. Once we get through this womb mapping part, it gets really good because that's when you really start finding the tools of what you can start applying to your life so that you can start rewriting a lot of those behavior patterns. I appreciate you all for joining me on this healing journey. I appreciate you all for supporting and loving on each other through this healing journey. Continue to follow each other. Continue to be a support system to each other. Shadow work can be complicated at times, but I believe as we do it as a community of people that want to travel down this healing path together to be the best version of ourselves that we can be so that we can be a light in this world and a light in the people, in the life of the people around us. I believe that we can actually do this, we can accomplish it, and we will and can be better. Remember, you have your creative faculties. Your words are your words are the most important tools that you can apply. And then your actions are a tool that you can apply to get the outcome that you want out of your life. It is I keep saying W twice. It's 3 W's. YouTube.com/girl_dad. It's in my bio. Why do I keep saying that? It's in my bio here on TikTok. Just go to my bio, copy it. You can throw it in YouTube and you'll be able to watch these videos, go through them, go through the journal with them, listen to some of this information if you need to go back and revisit it. By the end of tonight, I have this one up there as well. Like I said, follow each other, be a support system to each other. Keep the foundation of love in your life because it accelerates your healing. Love accelerates your healing. And trust me, living a life of love does not make you some pushover, does not make you soft. It actually empowers you in a way that connects you to the infinite source that we all come from. I love you all, and as always, love yourself like no one else can. I will see you all either sometime this week talking about something else, but I will definitely see you all on Sunday at 3:33 p.m.